Actually, I came here tonight to announce my retirement. That was a wonderful introduction, Shirley. I mean, seriously, I'm not doing that for the press in the room, please. Steve and the others I see out there, that was a joke. I really am. I'm blown away. I mean, you're humbled by those thoughts and those words. The stories are actually true. They're more than just exuberance, I think, by my good friend Shirley, but it's phenomenal. And it really is, to me, a testimony to the 405,000 people in the world that work for IBM. I get stand up and get the applause when things go well, and I guess if things don't go so well, I get the other kinds of comments that our friends like to pass on. But fundamentally, it is the people that make all this happen. And as you know today, I mean, I think if W. Edwards Deming was at this sort of a session, he would have thought about this as quite a transformational idea, quite a transformational thought, and he had, as you know, enormous influence over operational excellence, and I think indeed the way the world works. It's celebrated in MBA schools like a fine one here, in boardrooms around the world, and Paul and I were giggling at dinner about the red beads and the black beads and the M&Ms and how we all learned how to calculate Six Sigma, at least when I was in my 30s. I don't know if I could still do it today, but fundamentally had a major impact on all of us from a quality perspective. But I don't know, I think many of you might know this, but you might find this of interesting, that his ideas were never taken up in his home country. In fact, he had to go elsewhere to find an outlet for his ideas, and he went to post-war Japan. And the CEO of IBM Japan, Hashimoto-san, is with us this evening, and he was kind enough to point out to many of our American colleagues that there was a award, the Deming Award, established in Japan in 1950, by the way. And one of the astute professors pointed out to him, but that was really an industrial factory model, and ours is an end-to-end process operational excellence model. We're just a little late, but much more contemporary. But it's true that what Deming did impacted great quality for Japan when Japan wasn't known for having quality manufacturing. And as you know, it led to a phenomenal economic boom, the work that he had done there. In fact, I also worked at IBM Japan, and I certainly learned the process of continuous improvement and a phenomenal focus on quality and client excellence and the duty you have to serve your clients every day. But you have to ask yourself, you know, why were the Japanese more open to these ideas? And perhaps it was because Japan faced the challenge after the war of recreating an entire economy. They had neither the advantage nor the burden of a prevailing mindset, an established system, and or no status quo that they were trying to protect. I also believe that there's something similar happening today with regard with a not so radical idea, but one that sometimes is overlooked many times, and that's known as managing for the long term. We all know, I think today, the hazards of short-term thinking in business, and I think we've all are now living with a lot of those implications. The recent crisis has shaken companies, markets, economies, and many ways that the economies will function in the future. And I think you'd agree, and this is not, I think, a controversial statement, that a lot of this was driven off of short-term decisions for immediate gain, often shameless benefit of individuals, and at the expense of future prosperity. Again and again, people made trade-offs that shortchanged the future. Think about it. They slashed R&D to boost quarterly profits, only to discover they ate their own seed corn. They incented and richly rewarded short-term financial results, encouraging top management to get their pop or their flip, monetize the asset and move on, and let someone else live with making it work in the future. In the US and Europe, we generally laud these virtues of long-term thinking, and a lot is written about it, but I think you'd agree we seldom see it in practice. It's interesting to me as I travel around the world, and I do a lot of that, as many of you know, you do see a different mindset. You see a different mindset in China and India and Vietnam and many other emerging markets. And maybe perhaps it's like a little bit like post-war Japan. They are writing on a comparatively blank sheet of paper. Perhaps it's because they have more hope for the future. or perhaps it has something to do with their culture that's maybe not a few hundred years old, but a few thousand years old. But whatever the reason, I believe this capacity to adopt a longer-term perspective is a major national asset and an enormous competitive advantage. I say this as a CEO of a corporation that Shelley alluded to, that next year will be celebrating a tiny fraction of this kind of longevity, 100 years. But as brief as that is, it also taught us something about value and wisdom of seeing yourself not as a captain of industry, but as a temporary steward of a great enterprise. When you do so, you think about things differently, you manage differently, you invest differently, and you behave differently. I guess when things are stupid, you call them stupid as a result of that. Of course, strategic planning and goal setting are part of this, even as Deming has taught us the importance of process improvement. But he also taught us that quality has to pervade a corporate culture. So it's with managing for the long term, it's about creating and nurturing a culture of long-term thinking. It's not just about what you produce or even how you produce it. It's why you exist and your role as an institution and your impact on a society. IBM's former chairman, Thomas Watson Jr., the son of our founder, spoke here at Columbia in 1962, where he gave a wonderful lecture, and I'd like to read you a quote from that lecture. It goes as following: "I firmly believe that any organization, in order to survive and achieve success, must have a sound set of beliefs on which it premises all of its policies and actions. Next, I believe the most important single factor in corporate success is faithful adherence to those beliefs. And finally, I believe that if any organization is to meet with the challenges of a changing world, it must be prepared to change everything about itself except those beliefs. And as it moves through its corporate life, it retains that forever." Now, I want to repeat that last statement. Be prepared to change everything about itself except those beliefs. I was in a meeting in Washington recently, and they were talking about things like equal pay, equal work, diversity, and those kinds of issues. And I responded to some of the people in the administration. I said, well, we did that in 1933 at IBM. I really don't think we need to discuss it here today. We've had equal pay for equal work long before you ever had laws that encouraged that kind of behavior. It's an example of what the Watsons believed in. That statement and the value it expresses have been essential to IBM's culture of excellence and innovation through decades of change, in fact, including periods of severe downturns like the one we had 20 years ago. But managing for the long term is a management approach. It produces certain clearly identifiable behaviors and choices, and let me give you some examples. It determines how and where you invest and allocate resources. It's easy to mistake patience for inertia, for example. It takes a kind of corporate patience to invest in R&D. The payoff might come, it might not come. That's why it's called research. But on the other hand, when circumstances fundamentally shift, you reallocate your resources and your investments, and you do that with a mindset of where you're headed to the future. It takes a long-term view. It changes how you think about talent development. Grooming and selecting people for leadership roles can be well-planned and strategic, but it also can be political and disruptive. The cult of the personality, the charismatic leader, the superstar, the individual that's going to transform an institution. And this in sports. You know, we're not looking for the great quarterback or the receiver can do a 4.3, 100, or a 40, I should say, and weighs 250 pounds and is 6'8". Unfortunately, they don't play for the Giants. But, you know, you have to develop talent from within. You have to create leaders that can transcend generations. And it's not just about the top of the business. It's about throughout the organization, throughout the world, in the 170 countries that we operate in. Managing for the long term guides the ethics and behavior of both management and employees. Think about it as an insurance policy. against decisions and behavior that can damage your reputation and mortgage your future. Operational excellence over time requires ethical rigor through good times and bad. No rationalization, as we say internally. There is no rationalization, there is no excuse, and there is no tolerance. It shapes the way you see your company's role in an industry or your role in society, and Shelley's mentioned that. But I think Deming would agree with this because he viewed companies as part of a system and a global network of systems, a smarter planet, well before our time. This is also, by the way, what we mean by opportunities at IBM when we talk about this thought of a smarter planet. And Shelley gave you lots of examples, from road systems to the Data Baby. You see the TV ad with it, her wonderful farm producers, that sort of says it all in prenatal care. But fundamentally, it's that ability to have a vision and create the solutions for the future. It's also about business models. And again, this was alluded to when we decided that IBM's model as a multinational needed to transition itself and transform itself to a globally integrated enterprise and take our levels of competitiveness and productivity to all new levels that hadn't been achieved in any place in the world, at least that we could find or study. That has changed not only the market opportunities we pursue in emerging markets, but it also is the way we work, how we operationalize systems, from sales to marketing to HR, R&D, and yes, even legal. It has changed where we locate decision-making, as we've significantly lowered what we call the center of gravity. It has changed our understanding of the kinds of skills and relationships and responsibilities that IBMers must have to succeed as global professionals and global citizens. Finally, managing for the long term also tells you how and when you need to take decisive action. It's not the mindset of the slow and steady. It's not about being risk adverse. On the contrary, building the long term is not for the faint of heart. It often compels the enterprise to act when it's not obvious to do so. As we say, you want to be ahead of the trend, either that's in acquisitions or divestitures. You don't want to be trailing or taking a defensive posture. You need to place bets intelligently and risky bets, but again, before everyone discovers where you're headed. And at the same time, you need to be able to keep things energized and exciting when you're very, very successful. None of this implies excuses, ladies and gentlemen. There's no excuses. You have to produce consistent results and execute, as Deming would have said, with operational excellence. Shelley alluded to this earlier in her comments, but IBM has generated earnings growth in 31 consecutive quarters. We're the only member of the Dow 30 to do so. But managing for the long term is how you do that. You establish a model, and you work through transitions and change, and you can survive the ups and the downs that come in economic cycles. So this is what my colleagues at IBM try to do every day. It's phenomenal to me. It's great to watch what they do and what they accomplish. I'm just proud to be here accepting this award on their behalf. And I think, although I didn't know him personally as my dinner guest did, I think W. Edwards Deming would have agreed with everything I've said. But again, thank you. I appreciate it. It's been a wonderful evening for myself and my family. And with that, I'm done.
What I'd like to do is call on Rob Amon, Paul O'Neill, and Tom Cole, who's the chairman of the advisory board of the Deming Center, to present Sam with his award.